Okay, good morning. So we're up to Siman Kuf Samach Zayin Sif Yud Beis. Kuf Samach Zayin Sif Yud Beis. Im Hoyu Reichvim. So we're talking about B'tzias HaPas, and where they're making a kvias, and one person can be moitzi other people. But you need a kvias, you need a certain established setting. So says the Mishnah, says the Mechaber, Im Hoyu Reichvim, if they're all on horses, they're on, they're riding. And they say, okay, let's stop, let's have lunch. Even though each one is on the back of the animal and is eating his own loaf of bread, nonetheless, mitzdarfin, because that's considered a kviyas, given she'omdu b'makom echad, they've all stopped in the same place. But if they're sort of, walking around and each one's going to his corner, then not. If they're eating in a field and they're all sort of scattered around, even though each one is eating from the same loaf of bread at the same time, but each one's going to their own corner, and therefore one person is not going to be moitzi the other people in birchas hamoitzi. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Kot and Samach Aleph. Kiven she'omdu rotzalem the bezeh nechshav kamo yeshiva, because the fact they've all stopped at the same place, it's like a yeshiva that they're all sitting together. Umahani kiven she'omru noichal. Once they say noichal, let's eat together. Ve'echinu bezeh mokum lachilos, and they've sort of designated this place to eat. V'chanal b'sif yud aleph. Samach beis v'holchim. But if they're sort of wandering around, then not. Pirush. Loi mahani amira she'omru mitchila noichal. Them saying, let's eat together is not going to help you. Why? The fact they're all sort of going off on their own little place is mevatel the kviyas. If, however, they're sitting on the same agola, let's have lunch, let's stop here, and they eat together, the Magen Avraham is not sure, because they're on a carriage. On one hand, they're on the back of an animal, on the other hand together. So he says, on one hand they're on the noseh ba'agola, they're all traveling on a carriage, and therefore there's no kviyas because they're still moving. But on the other hand, they're all sitting in the same carriage, and therefore they should be mitzdarf. And indeed, the Eli Rabbi is noted to be mekel. On a boat, then even the Magen Avraham agrees they should be mitzdarf to kviyas gomahu, because that is called the proper kviyas. Kosva achrenim the shamash hamashamash pesuda yaitze bebirchas hamoitzi im shemei mischav v'notzes. It's the shamas who's running around backwards and forwards to the kitchen and serving the guests and whatever. So long as he has in mind to be yaitze from the person making hamoitzi, he's yaitze. Ava pisha hoylech ba todir, even if it's backwards and forwards. Veinu kavetz lashulchan mepnei shederech achiloson bekach. Now, if you look at number 49, Lemaisa, what's the story nowadays? You're on a train or something like that. So he says in 49, you're on a train carriage. He is maker like the Eli Rabbi that you can be mitzaref together. You're on the same carriage. It's as if you're in a house together. So long as you're all sitting pretty close by. You imagine on a train and you're all sitting in the same little area. But not if you're mufuzar, not if you're all sort of scattered all over the place. So again, we're talking about one person being moitzi the other person in birchas hamoitzi, like we do on a Shabbos meal. Whoever it is says Baruch Atah Hashem hamoitzi lechem haaretz, and then everyone eats from the slice of bread, the loaf of bread. But on a train, that's the discussion. But the Orach says that it can work as well. We said in 47, Lemaisa, the minig is that each person should make their own bracha, and that's going to come out more today. Shabbos is different. That's a proper kaviyas, and one person is moitzi, and you just take the bread and you eat it. That's different. But generally speaking, you're having lunch on the train. The minig is everyone makes their own bracha. Okay, Yud Gimel. Did I finish? No, I haven't finished. Sorry. Samach Gimel. Let's finish off Mishnah Berurah. Samach Gimel. Ve'im hayu eichlim tzorich loim v'chein. So this is going on. The Mechaber says If each one's going and scattered around in the field, then that's no kvius. So he should have said v'chein adle elkai she'amru neichel v'kan v'yoshev v'lechel afilu achiloi mahani kim sheim v'zarim. Even though they said neichel, because each one goes to their own corner, they're running around the field, that's not considered a kvius. They should all really be in the same place for one person to be moitzi the other person. Samach daled shelo kavu mokum v'oichlin chad inyanu. It's all one inyan. V'rot zolema shelo kavu mokum b'shas achilosan elo she'ochru mufuzarim zelakan v'zelakan lekachle mahani af she'omrim b'tchila neichel kan. So even them saying let's eat, if the reality is they're all sort of shooting off in different directions, that's not going to make a kvius. Okay, now Yud Gimel heichad delo kavu mokum. Where they did not designate a place where shekol echad mevarech la'atzmai im kiven hamevarech lohitziyom v'heim niskav lotzes yotzu. Then if so long as the person's being moitzi has in mind and the person being yotzi also has in mind to be yotzi, then you're okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah Samachei im kiven pirush b'diavad yotzu shelo yitzrichu levarech kol echad el lechatchila. That only lechatchila do you really need to, you ideally make your own bracha. V'ayim b'magen avram sheniach din hashulchan aruch b'tzarachin ki yesh me'ashenim d'savi d'loi kavi ein echad yachol lo'hitzi chaver af b'diavad. That if you don't have kavana, even b'diavad it doesn't work. Omnam b'via hagra ichriya l'dina k'divrei shulchan aruch. Ikar, he says that the lashon of the shulchan aruch and the wording and the concept of the shulchan aruch is ikar. V'da the din zeh shaykh gam b'birchas hamazon heichad d'loi kavu yachad. Bein b'shnayim, bein b'shleisha. The same is true when it comes to being moitzi the other person in birchas hamoitzi. Im kiven echad loitzi es chaveiroi b'birchas hamazon yotza b'di'evet. Okay, if you look at 52, it's actually quite an important footnote. 52. V'chein legabe bracha achrona. So it's not just only birchas hamazon; it's also true for bracha achrona ala michyo or bar nefashos. Kasav lekamon shebedi'evet im kiven hashemeh lotzes v'mavarich kiven lohitzi yotza. So you're a kiddush Shabbos morning and you had some cake, some kichels or whatever, and if someone makes an ala michyo, if you have in mind, then you're yotzer. V'afilu b'loi kvias klal, even though there was no kvias, you didn't sit and have the cake with this fellow, but he's just said an ala michyo, then his moitzi you. If the person doesn't know how to say his own ala michya, yotze afilu lechatchila b'berchas chaver, even lechatchila. Oid kosav sham b'shem ataz v'shachreinim. Now this is very nogeh, I think. Shekiyom nowadays shemezalzlim hahamoin b'brocha achrona. Many people are not so particular about the brocha achrona. I mean, if you do a survey, you go to a kiddush on Shabbos morning, there are 200 people there. You can have big signs up, ala michya and whatever. Do a survey when they come out. You made ala michya? You made ala michya? Yeah. How many of the 200 made? Yeah, I don't know. Yesh lismei chlasses ken lechatchila sheyevarich echad brocha achrona b'kol ram. That one person should make a brocha achrona in a loud voice. V'acherim yotzim al yoda, and everyone else is yotzim through him. Even if they themselves know how to do it. Certainly, not everyone knows it off by heart. If you can say it with the person doing it, that is better. I must tell you, in school, we instituted this about a year or two ago, that we have breakfast, right? And everyone's having their cereals, which most of them are mazonos. Some of them are having the bagels, which are also mazonos. That's a different topic. But let's say, and there's ala michya, and everyone say, okay, Seder starts in 1 minute. Everyone make ala michya. How many of the 250 boys are going to make ala michya? I don't know. So now we've got a new thing that one guy says ala michya, and he's moitzi everyone, and that's and it's a much more fair. That's much what the Taz is saying. Okay, let's go weiter. Yudalit. Imam subim rabim. You've got a lot of people, a big suda, siyam ashas, and you've got Kanai Nahara, a lot of people there. Gadol shebekulam beitzeh, who actually makes hamoitzi? The gadol shebekulam, the greatest person there makes hamoitzi. Says the Ramah, v'im shavim ve'echad mehem kohen, and if they're equal status and one of them is a kohen, mitzvah lahakdima, it's a mitzvah to give him to make moitzi. V'im hakohen amaretz, if however there's a kohen who is an amaretz, Talmid Chochom kodim loi. Interesting. Yeah, the Talmid Chochom will go before the Kohen Amoritz. V'im haKohen gam kein Talmid Chochom ele shepachas masheni. But if the second person is a Talmid Chochom, but is not as great as the first person, tov lahakdima. It's better to give this Kohen, even though he's not a bigger Talmid Chochom as the first one. Avol ein chiyuv b'davar. There's no chiyuv to do it. V'ayin lekaman siman reish aleph. Continuing the Mechaber, v'im yesh imoim balabayis hu beitzeh. If the balabayis is there at home, he should be the one to make moitzi. Fa'afidu im harech gadol. Even if the guest is great, v'amavarich yom atchila b'shus meirav rabbi Yisai. Baruch Hashem, we've hosted some anoshim chashuvim over the years, and you can get them to make kiddush and other things. But this halacha would suggest this is what we do, that you are the one to make moitzi. And it's a very interesting svara. The Mishnah Berurah says in a line, we'll get there in a second. What's the svara? Because the balabayis will cut more generously. And what's most important is that everyone gets a gezunta piece of challah. That's it. Very interesting. So you can have a Rosh Hashiva sitting at your table, and you can be mechavetim with lots of kibudim. But when it comes to baking moitzi, you should be the one to make moitzi, so you can cut a nice, generous piece of challah. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotan Samach Vav, Rabbim. You got a big crowd. Vuadin Shnaim, even if it's just two people. Or Mayri Kashe'ein Mohem Abal Suda, and the Balabayis is not there. Or Shekulim Balei Suda Vaychim Yachat. So when do we say the Gadol Bensches? When they're all on the, they're all eating out, or they're all in a separate location, and the Balabayis is not there. Gadol Shebekulam B'Chochma. Of course, we define Gadolus not in how tall he is or how heavy he is or whatever it is. It's in the Chochma. We make Kvoidei. Boitzeya. Moitzi Acherim B'Birchasa. He is Moitzi other people. Fa'afilu b'Makam Ta'aminig D'Kol Echad Mevarich La'atzmal Kikar. Even if the place is, the minig is that each one makes a bracha on his own loaf. Mikol Makam Aminig D'Gadol Boitzeya T'chila. The preference is that the greatest person is Moitzi other people there. V'Hachasen B'Yom Chasunosai Boitzeya. On the day of the chasna, the chasen, he is the one who makes hamoitzi. Even though there are people even greater than him. What's the reason? Look at 54. The whole suda is for him. It's all for the chasen and kala. However, if he doesn't want to, he's embarrassed, he doesn't have to. Nowadays we all do it. Yeah, everyone makes moitzi. You don't wait for the chosin to be moitzi you. Yeah, so he says over here, the name of Scheinberg, Shezem Mishum Shehu Meichel Meila Mechilasa. He's Meichel, the chosin's Meichel. He'll come in 20 minutes time, and after the first dance, he'll make moitzi. Yeah, so you don't have to wait for him. It only applies on the day of the chasna. Interesting. Yeah, it applies in the chasna, not in the Sheva Brachas. So either way, you can wash and make moitzi. You have to wait for the chasna. Okay, Samach Tes lahakdimai d'chsev v'kidashte. So if the kohen is there, then the kohen gets preference. Why v'kidashte? V'amr Chazal l'chol dov shebekdusha, that you should give kibudim to the kohen in any aspect of kedusha. Liftayach rishon, levarich rishon. So three interesting notes there. Look at 55. V'limud zeh kosev lekamon b'shem Magen Avram shenira shu midoraisa ve'ein asmachta ba'alma. That's an astonishing thing. So you're walking into the shul and you see a kohen is walking next to you, opening the door for him, and that could be a mitzvah deraisa. I have a few of my colleagues are kohanim. Rabbi Master is a kohen, so I'm walking together in the thing. I'll open the door for him and I'll say b'kidashte. It's a mitzvah say, to honor him. Liftach rishon, if you look at 56, or be a lekamon, dahainu lekoy rishon b'kriyas haTorah. That means he gets the first aliyah. Oid kosav sham shebechal liftach rishon uliyos reish hamedabrim b'chol kibbutz im nidrosh tchilif. There's various speakers, and one of them is a kohen. Another form of kibbutz is to give him the kohen to speak first. V'uadin ledaber b'reish hayeshiva b'yeshiva. To speak first in that setting. And 57, lastly, we said levarich rishain. He says ubir lekaman dahainu birchas hamoitzi ubirchas hamozon v'chein lehoitzi acherim bekiddush v'shekidashtu lechol davar shebekdusha. That you honor the kohen in that way. If the kohen writes lachalik covered laacher, if the kohen wants to moichel his covered and give it to somebody else, kosav sham sherishai milvad b'kriyas haTorah she'en yochel limchol. The kohen can be moichel his covered at all times, apart from Kriyas HaTorah. There, the Chazal Masakin, that the Kohen is going to come first because of, of Eva and things like that. Oid Kosov, Shetov Lahagdim Games HaLevi L'Yisrael. Chaim. That a Levi comes before the Israel, the Birchas HaMazon, the Birchas HaMoitzi, and Nisin Estaka, Im Hem Shavim B'Chachma, Shari Magdim and Israel after Kriyas HaTorah, because of course in Kriyas HaTorah it's Kohen and then it's Levi. Okay, good, let's carry on. Talmid Chochom Kodim Lei. Also, la Talmid Chochom la'akdim lefonov, ubezeh bizes haTorah. If the Talmid Chochom if there's a Kohen Amoritz, then the Gadol in Torah goes first. V'isel lekamen b'siman reish aleph the dafke makdim lefonov derech chayk u'mishpat kuhuna. Dahainu mipnei shel Kohen. Avim noisne reshus levarich shlem achamas kuna reshai. If he says no, you do it, then he's allowed to say that. Tov la'akdimai. So this is going on. This is going on the Ramah. The Ramah says that if the Kohen is also a Talmid Chacham, but is just not as great as the first person, then the Kohen actually Tov lahakdimai. Ve'isa b'Gemara, listen to this: Shemisha nizhar mizeh ma'arich yomim bekach. The person is ma'arich yomim. Interesting. Imoyim balabayis rotzalom balapsuda she'eichel imoyim. The balabayis who has, if he is there, then he has kadima. Why? Who but this is what I mentioned earlier. Ayin gimel for who kaidim afilu l'kohen Talmid Chacham. Why? Kadei sheyivtze ba'ayin yofa. He'll cut a good, generous piece of challah. Ayin dalet v'afilu me'reach gadol. Even if the reach is great, hine halechem chamudus kosev shekayim nagu lach lekavod legadol. Nowadays we give a cover to the gadol. V'amogen Avram hiskim imay. Ach kama achrein mefakfin bezeh. Ach besuda shekol ha'mesuben eichel kol echad v'echad mikar mevarchin atzman. When you've got a meal where everyone's eating their lunch, their sandwich, their own roll. Bevada hanochen shekol shebalabayis yechabed la'gadol sheyivtze tchila kiven she'ein kan tam mishum ayin yof. If everyone's eating the same roll, they're all eating the same harmonious sandwich or whatever it is, then there's no concept of the balabais cutting a generous slice. They've all got the same thing. And therefore, even then, the balabais, in that situation, the balabais should be meichel and give to the gadol to bench first. But when the balabais does say that and he benches, he should say Yomar Techila Bishus Meirayv Rabbi. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ayin Hey Yom Techila Hainu Afilu Hagadol Habetzeh or Balabais Mishum Midas Anov Tzarich Little Rishus. Yeah, but that's what it means. Bishus Meirayv Rabbi is not just part of the bracha. It's saying it's a sign of anivus. You're asking rishus. Everyone else is more greater than you, and therefore for lohem no elvach. Really, it should be you. But b'rishus, do you mind if I make moitzi? K'sheyesham kohen shemitzvah lakdimai imroitze achare v'tzeya v'odin ebrechas amazon tzarich l'men rishus. That's what we say. B'rishus hakohen. V'loi mahani mashayema b'rishus hakohen im lo nosim the kohen rishus. If the kohen doesn't give rishus, just saying b'rishus hakohen doesn't help you. We've got 2 minutes. Let's just finish off tesvav. It's just one more short sif. Ein hamasubin tesvav. Ein hamasubin rishoyin litoim ad sheyitim habetzeh. Very interesting. If I'm making moitzi and I'm being moitzi everybody, you can't eat until I've actually tasted the bread. Yeah. So ein hamasubin rishoyin litoim. The masubim, the guests, the people sitting around, can't eat until the person making hamotzi has actually tasted the bread. You can be mechalik the bread before I eat, but then just wait until I've tasted something. But if everyone's eating from their own bread, which they have in front of them, and they're not waiting for me to cut and then to distribute, then they can taste first. And if it's Shabbos, each one has got to have their own lechem mishnah. If they're all going to eat from their own kicker, then they should have their own lechem mishnah, unless they're all sort of together having the same meal. In that situation where they all have their own lechem mishnah, then he can eat before the botzeh. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Ayin Vav, Ein hamasubin. In a situation where the botzeh, the person making a moitzi, is being moitzi them, then they should wait for the botzeh to eat something. Even if they're making their own brachas, given shekulam zukukim lekikar shlabetzeh, it's like a derech eretz thing. Rishoyim litoim dahanu sheyirtu lachtich min hakikar shel habetzeh v'lisem kodim loy. Avol mutzav ve'ein bozeh hafsaka dekol zeh tzorech tzudahu. When I'm distributing the bread to everybody, that's a tzorech tzudah. Lekol echad chelka ve'hem yamtinu. Melech al hashizim utchila. Va'afilu noson lehem beferish rishus lezeh. Even if I'm giving them rishus to do it, yesh omrim gam kein deloi mahani. They should wait until I've eaten something. Now, v'das hataz bin in zeh. The ein kadai la betzeh sheychalek lekol echad chelkai achri she'enim rishoyim lito mehem at she'itzim hu tchila. The Taz says, and this is what we all do, it's not a good idea for the guy making moitzi to cut the challah and then to distribute it and then to eat something. Why? Because because there's going to be a major hefsek between the bracha and the achila. If I'm making a bracha and then I cut and distribute, it can take a minute, and therefore there's a big gap. And that's the mice what everyone does. You cut the challah, you have a little bit, and then you distribute. They all have their own bread, then it's different. ואם הוא שבס והוא עדין יונטף צורך שיהי דמאין לפני כל אחד מהמסומן לחם משנה הרי משריכים נסמך על הבצע שיש לפניו לחם משנה וליצה מיועץ לחם because otherwise they're being סומך on the בצע who has the לחם משנה then ואין מרשויים ליצאים קודם לי and then they wouldn't be able to eat before him because they're being יועץ they're chiyuv of לחם משנה from the balabais. Okay, we'll leave it there.